promise me that you won't laugh.
I won't laugh. I won't.
I'm trusting you. If I ever were to lose you, I'd surely lose myself. Everything I have found here, I'm not found by myself. Try and sometimes you'll succeed to make this man of me. All my stolen missing parts I've no need for any more, 'cause I believe, and I believe 'cause I can see our future days, days of you and me. There you go.
Well, that didn't suck.
Hi, hello, welcome. So by the time this video goes live, HBO's TV show, The Last of Us, will probably be airing its second season, either airing or honestly knowing my production schedule, it's probably over. But regardless, this makes me pretty excited because it finally gives me the opportunity to talk about one of my favorite games and also favorite pieces of conservative rage bait, that being The Last of Us Part 2. A lot of my excitement from this comes from less of the show, which is good, but it has more to do with the fact that I never actually thought I would get to see The Last of Us Part 2 finally get another chance at getting some much-deserved love and positive attention. See, if you're a fan of the HBO series, you may be aware that the show is based on a series of games, also called... I had it written down somewhere. Give me a second. Yeah. Okay, I got it. It's also called The Last of Us. Both the show and the video game, it's The Last of Us. It's all called The Last of Us. So you may know that, but what you may not know if you're not a MLG pro gamer like me is that there was a huge difference in the reception between when The Last of Us Part 1, it would later be named, came out for the PS3 in 2013 versus when The Last of Us Part 2 came out in 2020. The response was a little different. When The Last of Us Part 1 came out, it was one of the best examples of storytelling that there had been in a game. It's still one of the best examples now. Like, if you wanted to be super cynical, you could just say that the story of The Last of Us Part 1 is essentially just Cormac McCarthy's The Road, but with less depressing writing and more fungus zombie skulls to bash in with a pipe. But what makes it so great is that you fully believe Ellie and Joel's relationship. Like, I remember when I was 13 and I was definitely too young to be playing this game. Just seeing them outside in the snow, embracing with that cabin on fire in the background when they had just gone through everything, and me being with them for like 20 hours of gameplay. When they get to that point, when their relationship got there, it's still almost unlike any other relationship that I've felt develop in any medium. To give the HBO show some credit, though, the best episode in it is definitely episode 3, which is called Long, Long Time, which isn't even from the original game. It's kind of hinted at, but it's not really from there. So that is one leg up the show has over the game, but the rest of the show kind of borders on being a shot-for-shot remake of the game at times. And while I love Pedro Pascal, I just think the relationship from the game feels a little bit more believable. Maybe it's because it felt more intense to me because I was an emotional kid in middle school and I was just trying to play this when my parents were asleep. But when you play the first Last of Us, it becomes extremely clear why it's some people's favorite game of all time, and why it was definitely one of my favorites for the longest time before this other game came out. Because when The Last of Us Part 2 came out in 2020, people didn't like it. And I don't even think it was just because suddenly zombies and viruses weren't funny anymore. See, the reason I'm even giving this gamer history lesson to begin with before the actual essay part of the video essay is because it's kind of hard to talk about this game at all, especially this subject matter, without contextualizing it a little bit and explaining why I and most likely others have waited to talk about some of the game's themes until the dropping of season 2. It's almost specifically because of the game's queerness that there was so much backlash and hatred for the game when it came out in 2020. Now, I'm not going to get into all the ways that the game was unfairly criticized, not unless there's a season 3. I'd love to do that video, actually. The game is good. I'm dying on this hill. The game is good. It wasn't given enough credit. I swear. Play it again. Play it on a harder difficulty. You'll love it. It's crazy. To be fair, I know people who don't like the game and they have legitimate reasons as to why they don't. Like, I'm not trying to say that every single person who doesn't like The Last of Us Part 2 doesn't like the game because it's got queer characters. But I will say a lot of the criticism I see online does happen to be about the fact that it has queer characters in it. Like, a bigger chunk than I would like to think sometimes. Like, I've probably been showing different reviews that I found online that are either oddly anti-trans, anti-gay, and whenever I see this, it's so out of left field, and it's not hard to find these reviews, like, at all. Like, Google The Last of Us Part 2, you will see them. So this awful discourse, coupled with many people not understanding the narrative of the game because they never finished it, it just made talking about it at any other time besides now just awful. Just the worst. Luckily for me, though, season 2 is coming out. It's based off of The Last of Us Part 2. And since 2020, the United States has gotten a lot more empathetic and inclusive. Right? Anyway, regardless of the state of the world, I still did want to make this just to widen that conversation about the inclusivity in the game, and specifically talk about how its queer inclusivity not just makes the game inclusive. How many times can I write that? How many times can I write that in a script? But also how this inclusivity actually adds to the overall narrative and themes that the game is trying to tackle. So that's all what I'm going to talk about today. I probably gave a quick disclaimer at the beginning that was like, watch my video, please. I won't spoil anything, please. Please, with heart eye emoji. I probably didn't leaving the heart eye emoji. That's all true. I am going to have to go over some characters and some parts of the story for this analysis. It's just unavoidable. But I did rewrite parts of it, so that way I'm a little bit more vague on some aspects, and some characters I just even omit entirely. So if you're a fan of the series and you're excited for season 2, don't worry. There will be things to look forward to, especially if they change some parts of the story. So without further ado, let's put on our black nail polish and let's just get into it. You thought I was lying, I wasn't. Oh my god. Okay, so I went from doing like an relatively okay job, to doing like the worst job imaginable. But what are you gonna do? One of the most powerful ways The Last of Us Part 2 begins to display queerness is ironically in how it barely displays it at all. In Jeffrey Weeks' The Construction of Homosexuality, Weeks details the creation of our current social categories of non-heterosexual and heterosexual, and how much our labels have evolved throughout time. Originally, in many cultures, like in the Greek city-states and some kingdoms in Africa, there were various kinds of same-sex relationships, and they were just seen as a part of day-to-day life. In fact, it was only recently that labels like gay, lesbian, and bisexual started to become popular ways that we categorize people now. In some ways, the emergence of these labels have actually been somewhat beneficial. It's enabled the creation of different communities that we can center people around and offer support. But as Weeks points out, this is also a big example of social control by a larger society who ultimately sees queer people as deviant. Yet Neil Druckmann and the rest of the developers at Naughty Dog decided to rarely include any of these labels, if at all, throughout the entirety of The Last of Us Part 2. Now, by our current standards, it's pretty obvious what every queer character would be. Ellie is a lesbian, Dina, who is Ellie's love interest, would be considered bisexual, and Lev is a transgender boy. Yet no characters ever really refer to any of the three as gay, bisexual, or trans. And in fact, while I just assume to know their true sexuality and gender identities based on what is shown and said in the game, the overall lack of real clarification on this serves to queer them as characters. Ellie is never called a lesbian, she is just Ellie. Dina isn't bisexual, she's just Dina. And Lev isn't trans, he's just Lev. And it's greatly possible that the labels I just gave them and that others would give them isn't even how they themselves would identify. Additionally, there are a couple instances of characters treating Ellie and Dina like shit, or in the case of Lev, literally trying to kill them. But every instance of this is presented in a way that juxtaposes these old world values against the new values of the post-apocalyptic one. Being homophobic or transphobic is just kind of framed as backwards or a waste of time. Almost no one in Ellie and Dina's community is shown as being homophobic, besides Seth, the bigot sandwich artist. And no one seems to really care that they're both women who are clearly openly romantic to each other. And then the community Lev is a part of, who disagrees with his gender identity, is presented as being sort of cultish and out of touch. I mean, Seraphite fashion is literally just if a potato sack became all-purpose clothing all of a sudden. Although I would never say that to their face. Have you seen them? They eat their Wheaties. Also, it's not even like the game ignores these facts either. Ellie and Dina are explicitly in a relationship, and Lev's gender identity is discussed in a concise but extremely mature way that I'll happily detail later in the video. But this begins to show why The Last of Us Part 2 handles identity so perfectly. Its queer characters aren't stripped of their queerness or even stripped of the issues that come from their identity. Rather, The Last of Us Part 2 normalizes queerness as just an aspect of life, especially in the post-apocalyptic world. Suddenly, similar to how things used to be, issues of gender and sex are kind of just no one's real concern right now. Now anyone's sexual orientation or gender identity simply just is what it is. Hi everyone, Video Editing Anthony here. I wanted to tack this on to the end of part 1 because I'm now supposed to be done with recording. I'm in the middle of editing and I'm realizing that there was something I originally cut from the essay before I started recording that now would have been great if I mentioned it at the end of part 1 here. So I wanted to make sure to include it. There is a chapter at the very beginning. It's the first chapter of this book called Sexing the Body. And it's a chapter called Dueling Dualism, written by Anne Fausto Sterling. And in it, she makes a really interesting argument and point that terms like gay, straight, homosexual, heterosexual especially, are terms that, yes, tell us someone's sexual orientation, but also serve to reinforce the gender binary. Because if you think about it, calling someone, say, for example, lesbian, what that tells you is that they are supposedly a woman, so you're rooting them in the gender binary, who likes women. Again, rooting their interests now in the gender binary. It's a really interesting point, and it's something that I didn't really think of, that I really wanted to include in the video, but I couldn't figure out how to fit it into part 2. And I'm now realizing while editing, it's because this section really fits better into part 1. So I wanted to mention that here because I give The Last of Us Part 2 a lot of credit for having queer characters who are explicitly queer, but also not sticking them with any specific label. And I mean, don't get me wrong, the game isn't perfect in this aspect either. No one, to my knowledge, is explicitly gender non-conforming or gender fluid. But it is interesting how if you look at it from this lens, that Fausto Sterling is looking at these sexual labels through. The game is great in that part too. It's kind of taking these characters out of the gender binary because we're no longer giving any labels to their queerness specifically. So again, the game isn't perfect. It still has characters that are gendered, but I did want to mention this. One, because it could have been the perfect through line that I just missed out on, but also 2, just in case you're watching this and you're looking at some of the sources that I use and you would want any additional reading, definitely give it a read here. But anyway, on to part 2. In Nancy Mezzie's journal article, The Privilege of Coming Out, Mezzie details many of the intersectional identities that can affect someone's ability to come out as a lesbian. In the same article, Mezzie also mentions just how much the person's community or other identities can effectively force someone to come out. Interestingly, this is another aspect of queerness that we can see The Last of Us Part 2 tackle if we take a closer look back at the game's storyline with Lev. Just like how Mezzie discusses in their article about how religious ties can make it harder to come out, Lev's connection to the Seraphites, the group of potato sack wearing religious troglodytes, What was I on when I wrote this? Lev's connection to the Seraphites, the group of potato sack wearing religious troglodytes, makes it essentially impossible for him to come out as trans. Doing so would mean either banishment into the world of fungus zombies or execution by the religious leaders of the group. Yet when Lev is arranged to be married to a community elder, it then becomes just as impossible for Lev not to reveal his true identity, effectively forcing him to come out and in turn go on the run as to not face persecution. While on the run, Lev runs into a character named Abbie, another survivor on a mission who I won't really spoil here, but suffice it to say they establish a weird sort of bond throughout the game. As you play, Abbie eventually gets a clue that Lev transitioned, and once Lev realizes this, he asks Abbie if she wants to know any greater details about his identity. Lev is clearly reluctant in saying this, and in response, Abbie says that Lev only has to tell her whatever Lev decides he wants to tell her.
The apostate!
It's Lily! Better run, friend!
You okay?
Yeah.
Let me help.
I got it. Did you hear what they called me?
Yeah.
You want to ask me about it?
Do you want me to ask you about it?
No.
Okay.
This exchange is so small. It's such a small part of the game, so small that it's even easy to just look at it as some filler dialogue being put there to give some much needed flavor between cutscenes and pipe beatings. However, through a queer lens, it's obvious how important this moment of character building really is. Abbie in this conversation is effectively giving the power back to Lev. Before this, the disclosure of Lev's identity was never up to him. He was forced into silence out of fear of harm, and then forced into coming out when pushed deeper into a gender he couldn't identify with. And now, for the first time in his life, Abbie is giving him an option. Lev can share as much or as little as he actually wants. It's Lev's identity, and by the tone in Abbie's voice, it's clear that Lev's identity has no real bearing on Abbie's connection with him. To Abbie, Lev is a boy. There is nothing else that needs to be forced out of him. Even Abbie, a character who isn't trans, regardless of what these reviews say, they didn't play the game, is a main character who goes against the common idea of what it is to be a woman. In The Last of Us Part 2, you can play as both Ellie and Abbie. And while Ellie isn't a weak character by any means, Abbie is considerably stronger. Abbie is one of the buffest people in the game, besides the weedy monsters, and Abbie even has more health and more health upgrades that she can acquire than Ellie, kind of pushing the idea that she is in better physical shape. At the same time, though, Abbie's strength, gender identity, and sexuality is never questioned. The player knows based on greater context that she goes by she, her pronouns, and that she's had a romantic relationship with a guy, but nothing else is really known about her identity. While Abbie's strength plays a part in subtly telling the player her greater story and is utilized by the narrative, the game's world doesn't treat Abbie more masculine features as odd in any way. Abbie lives in a huge community and is a popular member within it, and yet no one makes comments to her about looking like a man. As far as how masculine or feminine Abbie is, all her friends care about is how well she can kill some damn fungus zombies. The Last of Us Part 2 is about the cycle of violence. but it's also a story about how identity can cause us to be pulled into that cycle. Abbie and Ellie both experience and perpetrate violence due to their connection they have to their respective groups. Abbie's identity as a member of the WFL puts her in the middle of conflicting loyalties, while Ellie's connection to her community in Jackson gives her a sense of duty that she can't shake regardless of how destructive it is. Other events and groups in the story that I don't want to talk about and spoil here clearly act as parallels to this internal struggle, with even one group conflict mirroring a real-world genocide that we still watch today. Including queer characters isn't just the game going woke or whatever the that means. It's including identities that usually aren't in the forefront of popular media, especially not in 2020, and allowing those queer characters to further this theme of identities being unshakable while also binding us to conflict. Lev was probably the character that players had the most problem with. He's trans after all, and gamers don't usually like it when games depict controversial identities, unless it's one they agree with. He's used as the prime example of wokeness killing the game's narrative, but the irony of this take comes from the simple fact that his story has the most to do with the game's themes, besides Ellie and Abbie, of course. By observing how Lev is literally running for his life, with one identity painting him as a target in an escalating war, and another making him fight his own people, it allows us to more explicitly see how our identities and connections can expose us to violence. Abbie, who, again, isn't trans, has a struggle that vaguely mirrors Lev's, which draws greater attention to the subtle underpinnings of Abbie's own identity conflict, and by extension, Ellie's emotional trauma. Lev doesn't only serve as a device for the main characters, however. Lev's story is not one of only struggle, but of freedom. He's capable, smart, adaptive, but most importantly, he's never fully alone. I find it hard to be a gamer sometimes. Not only do many of my anti-commie comrades think RGB goes with literally everything, we also appear to be a little bit more predisposed to ignorant views of the world that center us first and others second. But like I said at the beginning of this video, I love video games. I love this medium. I truly believe that I have felt the most and have been touched the most by narratives in video games than I have any other medium, whether it be TV, movies, books, music, anything else. And it makes me so happy that we have games like The Last of Us Part 2 that allow for me to be truly proud of this art form, you know, until another Call of Duty comes out or another development studio closes. Bye! If you've gotten all the way to the end, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Please like and comment. You're probably either my girlfriend or my mom, which in that case, I love you. But in case you're not, I'm really curious to see what you have to say in the comments. And I mean that. It's really hard to find good discourse on The Last of Us Part 2. It's like trying to find a Schedule 1 drug. It's super hard unless you know a guy. Please do comment down. Even if you disagree with this video, I'd actually love to see someone try to say that this game is actually problematic for different reasons. That's how we learn and grow, and that's how we see different perspectives. So I would love to hear it. Anyway, thanks again, much love, and I hope season 2 is good.